Let's look back to 1953. While America chased 300 horsepower and shark-like tail fins, an Italian engineer named Vittorio Jano locked himself in his Turin office to make a gamble everyone deemed insane, building a car with barely 38 horsepower. It was not for lack of skill. This master had engineered the fastest racing Alfa Romeos of the 1930s. These machines dominated European Grand Prix racing, terrifying German rivals. Jano understood raw power intimately, and that is exactly why he chose to ignore it. His employer, Lancia, was no ordinary manufacturer. It was founded in 1906 by a former Fiat racing driver, Vincenzo Lancia. He tore down Italy's dusty roads like a madman until he decided that standard Fiat machinery simply was not good enough for his ambitions. So he made a move no contemporary racer dared to attempt, abandoning a secure job to build his own factory. Lancia would never be a conventional carmaker again. In 1922, they unveiled the Lambda, the world's first car featuring a monocoque chassis and independent front suspension, while rivals were still nailing metal plates onto wooden frames. Then in 1948, the compact Ardea arrived, introducing the first 5-speed gearbox in automotive history. By 1950, the legendary Aurelia debuted the world's first production V6 engine. Every time the rest of the automotive world settled on its certainties, Lancia engineered something unimaginable. But their ultimate strategic vulnerability was glaring a lack of money. Vincenzo Lancia died suddenly in 1937 at 55, leaving leadership to his wife Adele and his young son Gianni, who was then barely more than a boy. Soon after World War II devastated Turin and its industrial base, when the conflict ended, a ruined Italy was on its knees, desperately requiring cheap, simple transportation to jumpstart its shattered economy. Fiat answered this demand with the 1100, a simple, robust machine, priced for millions of ordinary Italian families. Lancia, conversely, kept crafting over-engineered cars that cost too much and sold too little. Young Gianni Lancia recognized this fatal trap, realizing they needed a vehicle to compete in the mass market without diluting the brand's premium DNA. They needed a masterpiece. An affordable car on the outside, but one packed with the sophisticated engineering that defined Lancia's legacy. This is where Vittorio Jano stepped in with an absurd proposition. The car would be named Appia, after the ancient Roman road, the queen of the consular routes trodden by legionaries marching to the very edges of the empire. It was a name carrying 2,000 years of history. Let's analyze Jano's strategy. He took the complex Aurelia concept, that brilliant, expensive design that had stunned the world, and compressed it. Less than 3.9 meters long, weighing just 820 kilograms, with an engine of only 1089 cubic centimeters. But this was no ordinary inline-4 favored by Fiat, Volkswagen, or Renault. It was a V4 with an incredibly tight bank angle of just 10 degrees. The cylinder rows practically touched. No manufacturer had ever dared this for a mass-production car. The reason? The engineering hurdles were monumentally difficult to solve, yet Jano succeeded, delivering a power unit so ultra-compact it resembled a mere two-cylinder. Its mechanical smoothness absolutely astonished anyone who test drove it. When the Appia debuted at the Turin Motor Show in April 1953, the automotive press was deeply split. Some hailed it as a miniature engineering masterpiece. Others dismissed it as a vehicle far too expensive for its on-paper specifications, and that was the core issue. 38 horsepower versus 40 in the cheaper Fiat 1100. From a consumer perspective, who would pay more for less power? The answer, as we often see with truly avant-garde engineering, only emerged once drivers got behind the wheel. What they discovered completely redefined their expectations of what a compact Italian car was capable of being. Buying a Fiat 1100 in the mid-50s meant making a predictable choice. You bought an honest, practical machine, engineered to transport a family from A to B without pretense. It offered solid doors, a dutiful engine, and suspension, devoid of thrills but free of nasty surprises. It was the highly rational choice made by millions during Italy's post-war economic miracle. As roads filled with small utility vehicles, and the entire nation raced toward the future on modest, reliable wheels. Then there were those who opened the door of a Lancia Appia for the first time. They immediately realized that compact car engineering could operate on a vastly superior plane of sophistication. The primary shock was not the engine, the speed, or even the exterior styling, which actually shared the understated elegance of its larger Aurelia sibling. No, the real shock was a strategic absence. There was no central pillar. That structural support between the front and rear doors, deemed indispensable by every other car maker, simply did not exist on the Appia. Opening both doors simultaneously revealed an entirely unobstructed cabin side, offering a seamless, inviting entryway with absolutely zero visual barriers. It felt like stepping into an upscale lounge, not a car. With all the side windows rolled down, you experience the open-air freedom of a cabriolet with air flowing uninterrupted across the cabin. And yet, overhead sat a solid, silent steel roof. How did they actually achieve this? Eliminating that pillar removed a critical structural backbone. Without it, the chassis risked severe flexing, twisting, and eventually losing its geometric alignment. Within months, doors would fail to latch properly, body panels would groan, and the entire structure would slowly warp under the relentless stress of daily driving. Look at the American luxury brands. Even they, with all their resources, struggled to build pillarless hardtops on massive, heavy platforms. They constantly struggled with structural rigidity. Yet Lancia pulled it off on a compact car under 4 meters long. As we dissect the design, the secret lay in the unseen, massively reinforced front and rear pillars. A tall, rigid central tunnel ran along the floor, serving as the chassis' spine. Hidden reinforcements braced the underbody at critical stress points. Even the doors shut with such tight tolerance that the entire cabin locked into a single structural unit. This wasn't a styling gimmick. It was master-class structural engineering, the kind of solution usually reserved for cars costing 5 or 6 times more. Lancia rejected conventional industry logic, proving that elite mechanical refinement didn't have to be a luxury for the ultra-wealthy. Then we must analyze the mechanical genius hidden beneath that elegant, understated bodywork. Francesco Jano's narrow-angle V4 engine featured twin camshafts mounted directly in the block, a brilliant, highly unusual design that dramatically reduced the physical footprint of the power plant, while ensuring remarkably smooth, quiet operation. They also used lightweight aluminum for the doors, rear fenders, and bumpers. Because from a strategic standpoint, shedding weight meant superior agility, better throttle response, and maximum fuel efficiency. Up front, instead of the standard wishbone suspension used by almost every competitor, the Appia retained Lancia's signature sliding pillar setup. Patented back in 1922 for the Lambda, it was 30-year-old technology. Yet it delivered flawless front-wheel independence and a level of steering precision that rivals could only dream of matching. Competitors watched with a mix of awe and sheer bafflement. Alfa Romeo had just unleashed their brilliant Giulietta, a high-revving twin-cam sports car that captivated driving enthusiasts. Meanwhile, the Fiat 1100 dominated the mass market, with sheer volume and aggressive pricing. Caught right in the middle of these giants was the Appia. It wasn't as fast as the Alfa, nor was it as cheap as the Fiat, but it offered an elite build quality and mechanical sophistication that neither rival could hope to replicate. At the time, critics actively compared Lancia's engineering to Mercedes-Benz, famously calling the brand the Italian Mercedes. It was a car for those who understood the gulf between mass assembly and bespoke craftsmanship. Yet this very obsession became the Appia's fatal flaw. Manufacturing a car this over-engineered demanded excessive time, highly specialized labor, and premium-grade materials. Lancia factory workers literally signed the components they built, not due to corporate mandate, but out of genuine artisan pride. Every single Appia rolling out of the Turin plant carried the literal touch of expert hands, having spent endless hours perfecting every tolerance. This level of obsession carried a massive financial penalty, heavily inflating the retail price. The Appia cost far more than the Fiat 1100, presenting middle-class Italian buyers with a price gap that was impossible to justify. Who would pay a premium for a car with the exact same displacement, yet less power than its cheaper competitors? The answer lay in the chassis feedback. But to truly understand you, and I would have to drive it for ourselves. In the chaotic, high-volume showrooms of Italy's post-war economic boom, few buyers ever got that chance. Lancia devised a desperate, high-stakes strategy to alter the car's trajectory, a move both brilliant and incredibly risky. In late 1955, the factory built 14 heavy-duty rolling chassis and distributed them directly to Italy's elite coach builders. These design houses could spin bare metal into rolling sculpture. Legends like Alemanno Boano and Motto, each builder received a blank canvas and absolute creative freedom to reinterpret Lancia's engineering. However, three legendary names would write the most critical chapters of this history: Pininfarina, Vignale, and Zagato. Pininfarina took the platform and sculpted a 2+2 coupe of breathtaking elegance and balance. Boasting clean lines and flawless proportions, its finned rear treatment directly pioneered the design language of the upcoming flagship Lancia Flaminia. Vignale countered with a gorgeous cabriolet that quickly became the ultimate symbol of open-air motoring during the Italian economic miracle. It was custom-tailored for sweeping coastal roads with the quiet hum of that compact V4 engine providing the perfect soundtrack. But it was the third coach builder who engineered a minor miracle, a miracle nobody predicted. Elio Zagato was an engineer who measured success in grams. Inside his Milan workshop, every bracket was weighed and pared down. His obsession wasn't cosmetic styling, but aerodynamic efficiency and weight reduction, where pure functionalism dictated the final shape. Upon receiving Lancia's rolling chassis, Zagato executed the precise strategy he mastered better than anyone else. He wrapped the underlying steel frame in an ultra-thin, highly aerodynamic aluminum skin, producing a lightweight berlinetta, far lighter than the factory sedan. Debuting at the Turin Motor Show in April 1956, it caused an immediate stir. This uproar wasn't triggered by its performance, but rather its bizarre aesthetics, characterized by prominent humps across the bodywork. These structural bubbles on the hood roof and trunk lid were Zagato's undeniable signature design trademark. Yet here they were, so extreme, the vehicle resembled a tiny wheeled camel. The nickname was immediate. They dubbed it the Camel. Yet those mocking its look faced a harsh reality check in May 1957. An unexpected move stunned the Italian racing world when regulators suddenly greenlit the Appia for official competition. These special-bodied GT cars were certified just in time to enter the legendary Mille Miglia, a race that stretched across Italy from Brescia to Rome and back. Nearly 1,600 kilometers of public roads open to traffic. 4 Appia Zagatos lined up at the start, and what unfolded over the next 13 hours completely stunned the racing world. In the class from 100 to 1,100 cubic centimeters, these tiny Lancias seized first, second, third, and fifth place. This crushed the rival Fiat 1100 Zagatos that had previously dominated uncontested. The fastest driver was Luciano Mantovani, averaging a staggering 119.7 kilometers per hour, finishing in 13 hours, 20 minutes, and 22 seconds. His engine was specially tuned by Fassetti, a brilliant Turin builder who extracted 53 horsepower from that tiny engine without sacrificing its bulletproof reliability. Enrico Anselmi followed in another GTS with the legendary camel-backed car driven by none other than Count Giorgio Lurani, a prominent Milanese aristocrat journalist and gifted racer who had championed this vehicle from the very beginning. For nearly a decade after the Appia Zagato dominated its class uncontested, strategically securing 10 national titles across 9 years of intense Italian Gran Turismo competition. Yet the most staggering chapter of this campaign unfolded across the Atlantic at the 1959 Sebring 12-hour endurance race in Florida. At this brutal, world-class event, an Appia Zagato lined up with an unlikely 3-man crew that baffled many seasoned observers. Behind the wheel sat Peter Bumberger, a wealthy Swiss entrepreneur passionate about racing, partnered with Walter Rolfs and a third driver whose name belonged in newsrooms, not racetracks, Walter Cronkite. Yes, indeed. America's most trusted news anchor, who would soon broadcast the Kennedy assassination and the historic Apollo moon landing to millions. Though widely revered as the nation's most trusted voice, Cronkite was no professional racer. He was a skilled amateur with 3 wins at Lime Rock, but bringing a tiny 1089 cubic centimeter Lancia to race against Ferraris, Maseratis, Porsches, and Aston Martins with engines 3 or 4 times more powerful was a massive gamble, demanding absolute confidence in the machinery. Yet the Appia completed 140 laps, finishing a respectable 40th overall and 5th in class. To modern eyes, this looks modest, but historically, it was incredible, finishing exactly 1 position ahead of a factory Maserati. 250S, prepared by Carroll Shelby, driven by rising stars GM and Sharp. How could a car designed for quiet Italian streets survive 12 hours of brutal racing under the Florida sun? To find out, you and I must analyze a hidden engineering detail. This critical factor went unnoticed by casual observers. The Appia's structural DNA was strategically inherited from its larger sibling, the Aurelia, a luxury sibling that had pioneered pure racing technology, including rear inboard brakes and a sophisticated transaxle system. On the Appia, these features were simplified to cut costs, yet the core engineering philosophy remained uncompromising. There was an obsession with weight distribution and minimizing critical unsprung mass, all to maximize dynamic handling. This explains why this underdog could embarrass much more powerful machinery once the roads started winding. But while the Appia won laurels on the track, behind closed doors in Turin, a corporate tragedy was unfolding that would alter the destiny of Lancia forever. The crisis began in 1955, a year that stood as both Lancia's most glorious and most devastating chapter. In Formula One, Vittorio Jano's brilliant single-seater designs were finally emerging as dominant contenders. 2-time world champion Alberto Ascari, the era's premier Italian driver, was signed to spearhead their championship charge. Their innovative D50 was a mechanical marvel. Yet on May 26th, Ascari was killed during a private Monza test driving a Ferrari. He was 36. The tragedy struck Lancia deeply, not just emotionally, but financially, as their costly Formula One program had drained critical capital without yielding the expected returns. Squeezed financially, Gianni Lancia gifted their entire single-seater program to Enzo Ferrari, who capitalized on the designs in subsequent seasons. This marked Lancia's permanent exit from Formula One, closing a brilliant chapter they would never reopen as a factory team. Amidst this strategic crisis, a man arrived in Turin, destined to alter everything for better or worse. Antonio Fessia was an engineer of immense talent, possessing an unyielding personality and a rigid vision for automotive progress. He came from Fiat, having contributed to the Topolino project after teaching engineering at Turin's Polytechnic. Fessia believed with absolute, unwavering conviction that the future belonged to front-wheel drive. Appointed technical director in April 1955, he immediately targeted Jano's rear-wheel drive Appia, viewing its layout as an obsolete relic of the past. The resulting clash between these two stubborn minds was brutal. On one side stood the veteran Jano, who shaped 1930s racing Alfa Romeos. You and I must recognize the unmatched mechanical refinement he championed. Opposite him was Fessia, the dogmatic reformer, insisting every future Lancia must utilize front-wheel drive. 2 incompatible engineering doctrines, 2 massive egos, and 1 factory too small for both. Jano quickly realized his position was untenable once Lancia abandoned Formula One. The lead engineer lost his purpose within the firm, resigning and taking decades of brilliant experience with him. Fessia remained, now in complete control, immediately modifying the Appia to fix what he saw as flaws. He lowered the compression ratio, redesigned the cylinder head with hemispherical combustion chambers, and upgraded the intake. When the second series debuted, at the Geneva Motor Show in March 1956, it was 15 centimeters longer, roomier, and had a larger trunk. But the added weight largely wiped out any horsepower gains, robbing the car of that agile, high-strung responsiveness of the first generation. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Lancia's corporate ownership was undergoing a radical shift. Gianni Lancia, overwhelmed by crushing financial losses and the heavy burden of his father's legacy, sold a majority stake to cement tycoon Carlo Pacenti in 1956. The founder's son walked away, and with him went the final direct link to Vincenzo's original design philosophy. Pacenti was a cold, pragmatic businessman, not a car enthusiast whose sole priority was balancing the books of an automaker spending far too much on every vehicle built. Then, the third series Appia arrived at Geneva Motor Show in March 1959, finally capturing the mainstream market. The classic vertical Lancia nose was replaced by a modern horizontal grille inspired by the elegant Flaminia Muralia. With redesigned headlights, output rose to 48 horsepower, and a dual-circuit hydraulic braking system was added for improved safety. Sales exploded, peaking at over 15,000 units a year. By the end of the 20 production run, this third series reached over 55,000 units, nearly tripling the first and second generations combined. The Appia was finally a true commercial triumph. But at this peak of popularity, an internal war erupted inside the factory. The managing director Fidanza wanted to cash in on this success with a completely redesigned fourth series, convinced the chassis still had immense market potential. Fessia blocked him with all his authority. To him, the Appia was a relic designed by Jano under obsolete principles belonging to the past. Every single lira spent updating it was stolen from the company's future. That future for Fessia meant front-wheel drive, and it was already taking shape on his drawing board as the Fulvia. The clash was brutal, and Fidanza ultimately lost. He resigned, leaving Fessia free to kill off the Appia and usher in a radically different era for the brand. In 1963, the final Lancia Appia rolled off the Turin assembly line, bringing a legendary era to a close. Over 10 years, they built 107,000 units, including sedans, commercial vehicles, and custom coach-built chassis. A highly respectable volume, yet it was dwarfed by the colossal output of the Fiat 1100, which dominated Italian roads. The Appia slipped away quietly, with no fanfares or celebrations, replaced by the Fulvia, which Fessia had engineered entirely to his own specifications. A radically different machine featuring front-wheel drive, a dual overhead cam engine, and a competitive spirit destined to dominate global rallying. The Fulvia was the future, and in Turin, nobody looked back. But the true tragedy lay not with the cars, but with the men who designed them. Vittorio Jano, the genius who designed the Appia's narrow V4 engine, and who earlier had brought Alfa Romeo its most legendary victories. After departing Lancia, he moved to Ferrari, where he developed formidable 12-cylinder engines for sports racing. Yet this exceptional designer carried an internal darkness that no amount of engineering brilliance could cure. In 1965, at age 73, battling severe illness and depression, he took his own life. The man who gave the world some of its most sophisticated automobiles chose to leave in the quietest way possible, just like his designs, which never chased vulgar attention, but only pure mechanical perfection. And what of Gianni Lancia, the founder's son, who had inherited an empire too fragile for his shoulders? After selling out to Pacenti, Gianni abandoned the automotive world entirely. He relocated to Brazil, seeking his fortune in food manufacturing, a sector about as far removed from narrow-angle V-engines and sliding pillar suspension as possible. He remarried French actress Jacqueline Cessard, had a son, and built a fresh existence far from Turin and the heavy ghosts of an enterprise that still bore his father's name, but no longer belonged to him. Returning to Italy late in life, Gianni Lancia passed away in 2014 at 89, outliving the car company he had helped shape by nearly half a century. Lancia, without its namesake family, was never the same. Carlo Pacenti tried to preserve the brand's obsessive engineering culture, but soaring production costs and increasingly ruthless competition squeezed them dry year after year. Over in Germany, BMW was pioneering a new business model that merged premium build quality with high-volume manufacturing, a lesson Lancia had never learned. Meanwhile, Mercedes was refining its production processes to achieve an assembly precision that in turn remained a mere dream. Back home, Fiat used massive economies of scale and multi-million unit production lines to completely dominate every single market segment. By the late 60s, Lancia faced financial ruin. The Italian government intervened, brokering a corporate takeover that everyone viewed as inevitable. In 1969, Fiat swallowed Lancia, promising to save its identity through mass production techniques. That promise proved hollow. The first Lancias of this Fiat era, like the 1972 Beta, relied on cheap Fiat engines and gearboxes, shared platforms, and an aggressive cost-cutting culture that replaced the pursuit of pure engineering excellence. To make matters worse, the Beta became notorious for catastrophic rust problems that utterly destroyed the brand's hard-won reputation, particularly in the United Kingdom, forcing Lancia to buy back hundreds of ruined vehicles from outraged customers. The legendary automaker that once defined the pinnacle of Italian craftsmanship had been reduced to a synonym for rust and cheap compromise. Vincenzo Lancia would have turned in his grave. Yet the strategic concepts seeded by the Appia never truly died. Instead, they sprouted in unexpected rival designs. Look at the balanced weight distribution, the obsessive focus on cornering dynamics, and the thesis that a smaller engine could deliver a superior driving experience than raw horsepower. All of these principles reappeared decades later in vehicles that reshaped the global market. When BMW launched the 3 Series in the late 70s, with its carefully engineered balance of comfort and handling, it was unknowingly inheriting the legacy of a small Italian car that proved those concepts 20 years earlier with a third of the horsepower. And when Volkswagen launched the Golf GT in 1976, proving a simple hatchback could double as a sports car. Without relying on oversized engines, they were merely following a blueprint Lancia mapped out decades earlier on the grueling Mille Miglia course. Today, we find ourselves surrounded by an industry obsessed with raw power, extreme speed, and over-engineered technology. Electric motors pushing 500, 600, or even 1,000 horsepower. Massive screens and invasive driver assist systems taking total control. Yet ask any driver who has actually piloted a Lancia Appia, and they will tell you that this modest, low-horsepower machine delivered an organic connection that modern engineering has completely lost. It offered tactile feedback where every corner felt like an active conversation, every braking zone a dialogue, and every mile a genuine experience rather than just a commute. Historically, the Appia never dominated the sales charts. It never captured world championships, nor did it capture headlines in the mainstream press. But it quietly proved a fundamental truth that the automotive industry cyclically forgets and rediscovers, that engineering greatness is not measured in sheer horsepower, and true strategic excellence never needs to shout to be heard. If you enjoyed this historical analysis, leave a like. Let us know in the comments which iconic vehicle we should dissect in our next case study. And if you have not already subscribed to the channel to ensure you do not miss our next historical investigations that might completely reshape how you analyze the machines you drive.